So, be prepared to be very inspired by the incredibly creative and incredibly courageous, the beautiful Mrs. Lynne Cazaly.
Thank you. You know, I was staying in the hotel here and looking out the window at all the buildings nearby and seeing over the last couple of nights, late into the night, as lights go off in many of the buildings, there's still a few lights on here and there. And late into the evening, the lights are still on. People are working away. What's it called? Burning the midnight oil. From the days where there was no electricity, we had oil lamps and candles. And so I've seen some people in different parts of buildings burning the midnight oil, working away, trying to make something that they're working on better, because at the moment, it's not good enough. But burning the midnight oil is kind of the torturous area of the artist, you know, someone who's slaving away on some great creative effort, or the tortured writer sitting up in an attic working late into the night and then also into the early hours of the morning. To do what? To make something better than it currently is, because it's currently not good enough. I think we have a problem with perfectionism. In fact, great research and studies are showing the world is having an increasing problem with perfectionism. And I think some of the people that we see working back late are deluded into thinking that their efforts are actually making a difference to the work that they're creating. I'll just do another half an hour. I'll just do another 15 minutes. But unfortunately, what happens is us putting that effort in only makes us feel better about what we've created. It actually doesn't impact the quality of what we're doing. The law of diminishing returns says this. At some point we have great hope and optimism and we get great returns, and then there's this tipping point where our efforts become incredibly wasteful. So tonight I'd like to talk with you about how I think ish is one of the best ways that we can be working in today's environment. The world of work's changing, organisations are going all agile and new ways of working, and I've hung out over the last few years with some very nerdy geeks and dorks in the IT space. And hello and kisses, well, not kisses, that's too close. Back off a little bit, introverted, like working alone. Hello to any of you in the crowd. Because what I've learned from software developers and techo folks is that they are able to get great work done, lots of it done, and they get it out there rapidly. And so I've been curious over the last few years to see what is it that they do? How do they get things out there? How do these phones in our pockets keep getting updated with apps and software that work and then work better and work better and work better? And what I found is they love the idea of imperfection, or ish. The other side of imperfection is that trouble we have, procrastination. Who's working on something at the moment? Oh no, you'd like to be working on something at the moment, but you haven't actually started. Who's got a project that's sitting there? Yeah. Right, we're thinking about it. We're doing thinking work, but we're not actually doing work on it. So one of the problems with perfectionism is the fact that we actually don't even get started. So we've got procrastination as something that prevents us from moving into creating great stuff. And procrastination is one of those naughty friends of perfectionism. They hang around in the schoolyard, Mr. Voigt, mucking up and doing all sorts of naughty stuff. But there are some ways we can work around not just procrastination, but also the other side. So if we have trouble starting our projects, usually through fear of rejection, we're worried that we're going to put stuff out there and it won't be good enough, or people will diss it, or we'll get trolled, or it's not a good representation of me, or it will associate me with some subpar work. But in fact, there's a few different flavours of perfectionism. So perfectionism isn't just one thing. Because we're humans, it's interesting to see these two researchers, Hewitt and Flett, created the multi-dimensional perfectionism scale. Huh? There's a whole bunch of questions online. You can answer them if you like. But there are three types I'd like to bring to your attention, because in understanding them, it's certainly helped me move away from being a procrastinator and moving towards being someone who's much more interested and able to tolerate imperfections. So 3 types of perfectionist. Have a think about and listen to these as you might think about them. The first type is called self-oriented perfectionism. So you'd say to yourself, I have high standards for myself. So we might be saying, oh, that's not good enough. I can't put it out there yet. That's not something I could be associated with. It needs to be better. So if you're thinking that sort of thing, that's the first type of self-oriented perfectionism. The second type is societal. And we imagine in our minds, we say, oh, I couldn't do that, or that's not good enough yet because society or the group I hang out with or my community wouldn't tolerate that. They would expect me to do better than that. That's called societal perfectionism. Now, these 3 types are all on the increase, and it has bad consequences. So first one, self, I have high standards for me. Societal, I think society has high standards for me. But it's a perception. It's not actually true. How do we know? What even is perfection? How do you know when you get there? Self, societal. The third one is other-oriented perfectionism. I have very high standards for you. You better meet them. No, I won't drink wine from Aldi. I need something better. So anytime you put standards on other people, that's that third type of perfectionism. And I see what happens in workplaces. We kind of get a mix of all of these types of things at once. We can have some inner dialogue about what we expect of ourselves. Then we can have some inner nightmares almost of what we might expect others to have of us. And then we might be putting expectations and standards on others. Anyone who's got, dishwasher stacking issues at home? Yeah, see? Third type of perfectionism. That's not how you do it. You do it like this. There'll be a dishwasher stacking workshop later on this afternoon. So what do? If we flick our lid off, do I need it? Yeah, okay, thank you very much. Perfect. We'll talk about just what happened there in a minute. I can tell you a funny story about that. So what we've got to be more willing to tolerate is imperfections. And here's why. I was on a boat cruise out of Darwin a few months ago. We were out on this beautiful place called Sweets Lagoon. Blue water, blue sky, green shrubberies, red dirt. We're in a boat, croc spotting. Right, let's go croc spotting. Binoculars up. Oh, there's one. The boat people go, nah, no, that's a rock. Right? We call that a crocodile. Okay. Keep looking. Oh, there's one. No, no, Lynne, that's a log. Right? Tree trunk is a log. We call that a logodile. Oh, great. Thank you very much. We keep looking. Ah, is that one? Yes, good on you. But they look so similar. And the reason is crocodiles use what's called minimum exposure posture. Minimum exposure posture. They allow just 20% of their body to be above the water. That's all they need. I don't need to show that I'm a huge, ugly croc to kill you. I only need a little bit to kill you. So this minimum exposure posture of 20%, starts to ring a bell. What else do we know about 20%? Pareto. Vilfredo Pareto. right? Italiano, economist, money man. He looks at land distribution in Italy. He works out 20% of the population own 80% of the land. What the hell? Just a few landowners owning all this land. What the? Then Joseph Duran, a management consultant, no relation to Duran Duran, he then translated those findings, of course, management consultant, probably drew a quadrant model or something like that, and labelled it the Pareto principle. If only we would take more notice of this, that all we actually have to do is start and do a lousy 20%. The Pareto principle works in our favour. So if we start, all we actually have to do is a little bit. So instead of procrastinating, why don't we just work in increments, small packets of work, and get those done? Software dudes know this. They're constantly pushing code and releasing software in small packets of valuable work. So just as we might do just 20% effort, we're going to get a huge 80% return on our piece of work, whether it's a proposal or a project, presentation, a website, whatever it is that these people are working on late at night. That also means we're going to spend a whopping 80% of time, what I call totally dicking around. 80% of our time is only bringing us a measly 20% of value or 20% return. So be like minimum exposure posture croc. You only have to put a bit of effort in and you can start to test your work, put your ideas out there. You agree with that one? You like that, Colin? So I'd like to do a little bit of research now with the crowd and just have a talk about ish. Because ish stems back from like the 1800s and it means somewhat or approximately, near enough. And we know a lot about ish, we experience it every day in our lives. What time do you want to meet up? What, 6-ish? How long will it take to get to the restaurant? 10 minutes-ish? But now, instead of this ish being on words like Danish and English, and perhaps on 6-ish, the word ish is now starting to stand on its own. So, are you hungry? Yeah, ish. Somewhat, approximately. So when I release my 20% of whatever effort it is in my presentation or project or piece of work, it only needs to be 20%. It'll be near enough to put it out there and get some feedback, get some responses, get some input, test the thing out. Wouldn't you prefer a smaller course correction now than knowing that your stuff is totally shit later? Small course correction. Who's got a Dyson vacuum cleaner at home? So years ago, Dyson said the future of vacuuming is bagless. So they have the clear, beautiful vacuum cleaner, no bags to empty. Now they say, sorry, the future of vacuuming is cordless. Now it's all battery operated. But Dyson didn't get there by working on something, dicking about and procrastinating at the start, nor did they keep going until they didn't know when to stop. No, they actually kept putting out prototypes, small increments of work. Small samples, prototypes, got heaps of feedback from people on how they like to suck up dust, dirt and dog hair. And so now, instead of just procrastinating or continuing to go, perfecting, we not only have to find a starting point, but we also need a stopping point. Software developers, as they're starting their projects, they create a definition of done. Not dumb, done. And this is what helps us prevent perfectionism. Because if we don't know where the stop point is, we will keep going and keep going and keep going, aspiring to find this invisible and unreachable place called perfection in our mind. And we do it to try and feel better about ourselves. When in fact, we'd be much better to release little pieces of work, get some feedback, input, suggestions, ideas, and now iterate and improve on things over time. And most of all, if we can show some imperfections here and there. Yeah, the cap came off my marker, said a few wrong words. My lines and writing isn't perfect. I might even trip on the carpet up here. But the interesting thing about a thing called the pratfall effect, pratfall meaning you fall on your butt. But if you show a weakness or a flaw or an error, a human part of you, the pratfall effect, also known as the blemishing effect, kicks in. And people are more accepting of you. Except if you're already a tool and you do something stupid, people still think you're more of a tool. So they'd have to kind of think you might be okay at first, then you have your little fluff, an error, and then they'll think better of you. So it's this crazy paradox. We think we need to keep working on something to make it perfect because otherwise we'll look bad. But in fact, if we show some of our flaws and be a little bit rough around the edges and a little bit imperfect, people are way more tolerant of it. In fact, we endear ourselves to them. Sheldon and Amy on Big Bang Theory, on their wedding day, Sheldon was struggling to tie his bow tie. And as Amy's helping him, she says, "Don't worry, darling. The pratfall effect will work in our favour. The audience will see our human side and they'll be gracious and accepting of us. And there's nothing truer. Life's too short to be burning the midnight oil on anything. Release small increments of work, get some feedback on it. It might feel rough around the edges, but as you improve on it, you'll be able to iterate and make things better and better over time. This is the stuff that tackles and breaks this hold that perfectionism has on us. And if any of this is threatening any of the perfectionists in the room, there's an even lower level of quality, known as JBGE, just barely good enough. So even when you think, now it's good enough, you could have probably stopped 2 or 3 hours ago, because a level of just barely good enough is way good enough. And the definition of done, time's up, I'm done.